Hello all, Alison here. Welcome back to Words and Pictures for a few minutes of fun. We're back on the Altered Jar candle lanterns today. If you missed the previous episode, I'll link to that down below. In that one, I did some very simple tissue paper versions. These are not the ones we made last time. We made autumn ones because that's what it was, but these are just some that I made with some of the Tim Holtz tissue paper. So that's a really simple way to create a very lovely handmade gift. You can use a real tea light in there, that's what I do, or you can use a battery tea light. That's just literally some tissue paper glued onto the jars. I did a slightly more detailed, more interesting version in the previous one, and also showed you all the other candle lanterns that I have made over the years. But I'm focusing on more wintry ones today. So those are winter tissue paper. There are a number of ways to get a more mixed media look onto your jar, depending on the products you have. My best advice is try it. You know, I haven't got every product in the world, so I don't know whether it's going to work. But for instance, this is done with alcohol ink onto the jar. So if you've got alcohol inks, it's very easy to pounce alcohol inks onto glass. That will stay. I added, I don't know if you can see in the light there, some glitter on. This is a gherkin jar, so it's actually a really lovely shape. It has these little indented windows and things. And then I stamped and used embossing powder, white embossing powder. So these are stamped snowflakes, white embossing powder. Please wear goggles if you're heating glass with a heating tool, and keep it at a distance. Use tongs to hold it or a spatula. You do need to be careful, because if there's a chance it could shatter. I absolutely can't take responsibility for any of that. You need to keep an eye on how hot your glass is getting. Move on, go to somewhere else. Don't heat all of the snowflakes all at one time. All of that, you need to be very, very safety conscious if you're using a heat tool around glass. But I'm still here. The jar is still here. That's very sturdy glass, so that works beautifully. So that's alcohol ink, embossing powder. So that's an option. This one, I love this cloudy, misty version here. That is very, very simply, it's the DecoArt white spray. I'm just peering around to see if I can see it to show you what it is I'm talking about. It's the mixed media mister is, I believe, what it's called. Yeah, here's one. This is the green. DecoArt Media Mister. That's the yellow green. This is the white. Obviously, is the white here too? Yes, there we go. Shimmer Mister. So that's the white Shimmer Mister, which I have found to be permanent on glass. I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that's what that is. So that gave me immediately a kind of snowy, misty background. Very, very simple. This one, which has got lots of these Tim Holtz snowflake cuts, die cuts on it, I'm pretty sure I just sponged on, first of all, maybe some clear gesso or white gesso, and then just Fresco paints. So that's doing a light sponging of Fresco paints, and you can see I've made sure not to completely cover the jar, so that when the candle is lit in there, it not only glows through the snowflakes, but you get little sort of cracks and icy patterns. So that's another really lovely way of creating a mixed media textural background onto there. So that's just my little In the Bleak Midwinter stamp from PaperArtsy. As a label with twine around the top of the jar. What else? So the one we're going to have a little look at today is the one I've done for a lot of my Halloween jars, of which there are many, which is to use a clear matte medium or gel medium or gloss medium through a stencil, and then you can either use Shimmer Mister over that or sponged white paint, watery white paint. We'll probably do a bit of both of those. That's obviously got wire wrapped around the top. And we are, as well as creating this mixed media background, we're going to be using some die cuts. So you can see here, I've been doing my winter die cutting. If you want to see a process like that, not this one, I didn't film this, I'm afraid, but it's the exact same process as I did when I was die cutting all my autumn leaves. So I'll link that video as well as the candle lantern video down below if you want to see the process of just spritzing papers and then doing many die cuts. So I've got snowflakes and greenery going on in there. I'm thinking we might use some of that greenery to create a decoration at the tops of these jars, but mostly it's going to be these gorgeous trees that I'm aiming to wrap around the bottom. But we're going to need to create our snowy, starry, I'm thinking maybe some of these stencils we used the other day. As you can see on this Halloween one, that was the Harlequin that I've used on there. Well, I'm in two minds at the moment, but I'm going to keep my Shimmer mister nearby. I'll have some Fresco paint around, and I've got obviously a couple of jars. So I think that's maybe a small Hellman's Mayo, maybe. Can't remember what this is. I'm slightly sad that we're going to lose. There's some lovely printed lettering on there. I don't know if you can see embossed lettering that's going to vanish under the die cuts, but not to worry. And if I'm making a pair of jars, I quite like to have them of slightly different sizes, because then when they stand next to each other, it's just a bit more interesting to look at. But if you want to make a pair of absolute bookends, of course you can do that and have two jars the same size. So I'm going to grab myself some supplies that we're going to need for this background, and we'll get to it. Back in a sec. Ready to play, at least the first stages. I've just thought another thing you could do, having done all this die cutting, is it would be perfectly possible to wrap one of these around a jar and create a backing exactly like that. There you go. It's done, and then you'd have the light shining through all those gaps in the snowflakes. So another really strong option for creating your jars. That would also be really nice. So these are just the sheets left over from doing all that die cutting. You'd need to glue, if you're using the fir branches, gluing all those bits are going to be fun. But the snowflake one I think could work really well. That might be something I do when I've got a couple more empty jars. Right, so I'll just show you the basics of this. I've got some gel medium. So gel medium is a thing used in painting, either to extend the life of your paint or to seal, and can also be used as a glue. For the most part, they look white in the jar, but they will dry clear, and you can get them in a matte finish or a gel finish or a satin finish. I think because we're talking about candlelight and we're talking about that showing through, I'm going to use the gloss. This one is a super heavy, which makes it very, very sticky and gloopy. This is just a regular gel. You do probably want at least a regular. You don't really want something very, very runny, because that'll get in a mess quite quickly, I would say. But as far as the stenciling process goes, it's exactly the same as we've done on tags, except that you have to go round corners, which is not always the easiest thing to do. Now, I know that I'm going to have some die cuts coming upwards, so I don't need to stencil right down to the bottom of the jar. So what I could do to make my life a little easier is go horizontally around. One thing that might make your life easier is to tape this down, because that's going to hold still much more effectively. So yes, I think that seems like a sensible thing to do. I'm just going to grab some tape, which hopefully I've got nearby. Just some masking tape from the DIY shop. This useful stuff to have around. It's great if you're marking up watercolor paper or holding it down ready for watercoloring. But as with any sellotape, it's a good idea to bend the end down when you finish, so that you don't have to do what I'm having to do now and find the end of your masking tape. Grand. So, oh, that's unhelpful. Thanks, masking tape. I think we will do. I think I'm going to go starry, because that's a nice Christmassy thing. Now, as you can see, it's not quite long enough to go around the whole jar. So I am going to have to do this in two batches, because I will need to let the gel paste dry in between. So this is probably going to be a few minutes of fun over a couple of days, maybe, because of drying time. But you can always go and do something else in the meantime. So it's not that I have to sit here and watch it dry, obviously. So that's one end taped down. And don't worry about your stencil getting all bent up. It will unbend. And that's the other end taped down. There we go. And that should be enough to just sort of hold it in place as I'm smearing. You want it quite tight to the glass. Now, obviously, these mixed media backgrounds are messy and mucky. I'm not trying for perfect stenciling. What I want is some texture onto the jar that's just going to operate as a resist, really, when we apply either paint or the Shimmer Mister spray or whatever other spray you have. Your only problem with using something like distress products here will be that those aren't going to be permanent on glass. Anytime they get wet, they're going to move. So you really want a product like acrylic paint that will stay put once it's dry. Possibly you could use something like the distress crayons, because they are mostly permanent once dry. You have to do quite a lot to mess them around. So I'm just getting, as you can see, it's not perfect starry stenciling. It's a hint of a starry snowy night going onto that jar. And obviously I want, in the usual way, to scrape it back so that I haven't got oodles of extra paste going on. And again, of course, because this is essentially a glue, this medium, I will want to get the stencil into water as soon as I'm done with it. I'm in two minds at the moment about whether to use this stencil on both jars or whether to use the other starry stencil on the other jar. And at the moment, my gut is saying this one, partly because this one won't look so good sideways. It definitely wants to be upright. So let's peel that back. With the glue, it's going to sort of fling back or move a little bit. But I hope you can see I've got a decent stab at a starry night there. If I was feeling bold and brave, I might just sort of hand do the others through there, but I'm gonna be good, and I'm gonna let that dry. You could heat dry it. There's a slight risk that it won't go quite as clear if you heat dry it. I'm more inclined to let it dry overnight. And since I'm here, I think it is going to be this one again. I think I do want them to be a proper pair, these tags. So I'm going around with the same stencil. I've still got the same masking tape on it. Yes, it's going to be even messier because there's still some glue through on the other side of that stencil that's going direct onto the jar. But as I say, this is a misty, snowy night. It's not a clear, starlit, bright night where everything is perfectly outlined and beautifully shaped. It's getting some texture that is going to be interesting to the eye and the fingertips, and especially when it's got light coming through it with the candle lit inside. It's just going to create some detail and interest on this jar. So one of the lovely things about this stencil is the stars are more profuse at the top, lots and lots of them, many stars, and then as it goes down towards the bottom you get fewer and fewer. So it's like the night sky at the start of the night, you can't see many stars, and then more and more and more start appearing. So again, I'm just scraping back so that I haven't got oodles of extra layers of gel. It's a good idea to go in a couple of directions so that you're getting into the points of the stars when you've got a detailed stencil like this. But I'm mostly now just scraping away. trees anyway in the long run. Good, grand. So I'm going to peel that back. And around it goes, and you can see where I'm at the top here, I've got sort of extra little bits of gloss gel sticking up. Don't need those. I'll just take those off with my fingers, wipe them with a towel. Great. And again, so at the moment it's white, but it is going to dry clear, as most acrylic glues do. You know, an acrylic craft glue will dry for you. So now it's a waiting game. It's get the stencil into water as quickly as possible so that that gel medium doesn't dry on it, and let those dry. I will then go back in and fill in the gap, let that dry, and when I come back we'll have fully starry backgrounds to add the next layer of medium to. I'm not going to say back in a sec because I'm probably going to be back in about 24 hours time. And we're back. As you can see, the gel stars have dried completely clear. So there's another option there, of course, which is to use an opaque white texture paste, even maybe with some white paint added in for extra opacity, and stencil your stars in white, and then you could have a bunch of white stars on a clear jar. My original idea had been that the stars, or whatever stenciling I'd done, would act as a resist, and therefore light would shine through the stars and the background would be done. But of course the gel is basically the same surface as the glass, so the sprays and the paints that I used kind of went over all of it, but I ended up really loving that messy effect. So there are ways to go about this differently. So if you wanted white stars, you could absolutely stencil in white paint or stencil in white texture paste. Actually, I might do one with white paint. That would be really pretty. That's for another day. Before I go on to doing the mixed media for that, I need to cut a couple of extra trees, because as you can see, this one by itself doesn't go all the way around. So I need almost 2 whole ones for this jar, and I need at least 1.5 for this slightly smaller jar. So I'm going to cut 2 more tree lines. This is the amazing Treeline die. I think it's called Treeline. It is called Treeline. Tim Holtz die, and of course when you cut it out you also get a lovely stencil treetop. We might use that on one of the other tag backgrounds later to just sponge some ink through and create a tree line that way. So just very quickly on the cutting, in case anybody's never seen a die cutting machine before, when you buy one of these Thinlits dies, you get this very thin steel die with cutting edges, if you can hear that. And so with a die cutting machine of whatever sort, this is the Sizzix one, you build your sandwich with which you're going to create the right pressure as you roll it through for this to cut through the card you're using. It'll all make sense when you see it happen. So I'm placing the cutting edge face down onto the card I want to cut. I'm putting the rest of the sandwich in. That makes it the right height, but it's going to provide real pressure as it goes under the rollers here. Sometimes it requires an extra little bit of paper as a shim, actually maybe I'll go, where's a good bit of nice greenery? Maybe I want to go this way, and then we could do another one here. Or do I like, ooh, I quite like that with dark treetops. So it's kind of choosing, yeah, I quite like that with the dark and the light. I think I'm going to go there. So that's going to go through there, sort of vaguely choosing what colours are going to end up on my tree line. So once you've got it all lined up, ready to go through, you just make sure the plates have caught under the rollers. Oh, God, stop sliding. Just having one of those days today, you know. Behave. Such a long to-do list, and I could do with you behaving yourself. So sending the sandwich through. Come on, thank you, finally. More haste, less speed. Was there ever a truer proverb? And this isn't the usual place I keep my die cutting machine, of course, which is why it's sliding around under my hand in an unhelpful kind of a way. And then once you've pressed it through, pick it up. You can see that's cut out the edge. And sometimes you just need to do a little bit of wiggling to get the whole thing to come through. If the paper is then caught, I've got a little bit where I can lift it up there. If it's not quite working, you can see all these little holes on the back here allow you to poke through with a little poking tool. I tend to use one of the Ideology pins to do this, but you know, anything like a pin. So it's just releasing the card so that it doesn't rip. Poke, poke, poke. And when you've got enough free, you can usually peel it away perfectly happily. Check that you haven't got any bits of paper left going in there. I can see a couple in there, so you just poke those out so it's ready for cutting next time. And because there are lots of little detail pieces in here, you just need to take a quick look and poke some of those out. Lots more die cutting, of course, as I've already mentioned in the autumn leaf session, autumn leaf die cutting session. I didn't film myself cutting all the fir branches and snowflakes because I thought once you've seen die cutting happening once, you really don't need to see it again, or again and again and again. Grand. So I'm going to cut my other tree line and then we'll come back and do some more cutting. We'll do the decorating of the jars. Back shortly. Tree lines are ready, and yeah, I'm going to have a little experiment with how I want this to work today. I've pretty much done this differently every time I've done these jars. Every one is a journey, is an exploration. I've got a little piece of natural sponge in case I want to sponge on some gesso or some white paint. I'm going to have a little go with this Shimmer mister because that is one I've had some success with in the past, but I'm aware that this is quite old now and I haven't used it for some time. So we'll see whether this succeeds or not. So this is, details will be in the description as usual. This is the DecoArt Shimmer Mister. And actually that's quite nice. It does have a slight pearlescent effect to it. And I just love the sort of randomness of this and the texture of the stars. So obviously, depending on the stencil you've used, you could use harlequins, anything you like. You'll get different textures going on underneath. If I stand that upright, that is liquid enough that it's going to create lots of lovely drippy patterns. Don't worry that the stars at the moment are less obvious than they were before. What's quite important is not to end up making this completely opaque, because then there's no point putting a candle in the jar. What you want is a sort of a cloudiness to it, and I think you can probably see when you look through that light is still coming into there in a rather lovely way. So it is a question of being a bit careful not to completely cover it up, and also being so you can see the drips are starting to form around the stars, which starts to highlight that texture. I'm going to put a little bit more of that on there so that it can run and kind of dribble around the star texture. And then, as I said, it's going to be a question either of patience or of a great deal of care if you want to use a heat tool on it. So I usually have nearby, hopefully it's going to be true today, a pair of really sturdy safety goggles. Again, you can get those in DIY shops, that kind of thing. And just in case. Also watch out, because of course glass will heat up. This is why we've got safety goggles on, but watch out for your fingers. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to give a sort of initial bit of drying to that so that it has a chance to just stay in place. And you can see as it's drying, I'm just getting those sort of little bits of texture forming around the glass again, which is a really nice effect. And you can see I'm not heating for too long at a time. I'm just allowing that to gather around the stars. And it's a lovely sort of messy mixed media effect. But you can see it is dripping off. This is what I'm wiping up down here. Really, I could wipe that up onto a tag, and if any more comes, I will, because given it's a shimmery sort of a spray, it does have a lovely resist effect as well if you use it on a tag. But I think that because it's a snowy time of year, I might aim to add a little bit more whiteness to this, possibly with, I'm going to now dry it the other way up so that what is left in terms of liquid gets a chance to go in the other direction. And then I just considered having some colour and some shimmer. So this is Distress Oxide Spray Speckled Egg, which I think might give us quite a nice sort of effect. And then I've got Distress Mica Stain Phantom Mist. I considered one that's a bit bluer, but I sort of thought I'd rather stay misty than full-on blue. The white is not fully dry yet, and that's intentional, because I want this to, if it's going to do anything, I want it to slightly mix with what's going on. So I'm going for a sort of wintry sky type thought. And again, that is running around the other textures and just giving you, ooh, yes, see, a little bit of water. I do love Speckled Egg. Speckled Egg is one of my favourite colours in the Distress line. Just that lovely soft duck egg kind of colour. So you can see we're getting lovely drifts of inky splotches. And again, I'm allowing that ink to run. Quite enjoying that. And anytime there's sort of too much, or you want to just knock it back, that's your paper towel. So it's a really subtle sort of effect going on at the moment, but I like it a lot. So I am going to put some onto this one. Oh, I did put some onto this one as well. So I need to add some water. That water activates the chalkiness of that oxide colour. So again, I'm letting it run. You can see this is a mildly messy process, but it's about watching and sort of keeping an eye on when you like the effect you've got. Let's have a look at that one. Right, so time to turn that one upside down. You see it's a gradual building of things you're enjoying. In a minute I'm going to go back with some white, because obviously I want a snowy effect, but you know, we're going to finish with some spatter, whatever happens. Bottom of the jar doesn't matter so much. Nobody's ever going to see that. I think I do want to add a little bit of shimmer, just for fun. But I'm going to add it principally around the bottom of the jar, because I know that this is a darker colour. And just let that maybe dribble towards the top. Dribble down towards the top. So I've got a sort of silvery shimmer in there, just creating a bit more texture, a bit more drift. See that sort of magical dribble. It's the dribble that is the magic. It's letting it do it. That's a bit too much of a stripe for me, so I'm just going to knock that back a bit. Don't like that full-on stripe going on there. And I know that at the moment you can't see much in the way of shimmering, but that will increase as it dries. Just because there's all this ink on here, I've got a little ATC card that happens to be lying on the desk, so I'm going to pick up some of that just as a mop-up. And on there, maybe you can see that shimmer that is available. Yeah, I'm going to get a tag and mop up some more. Or have I got a book page? Right, there's another little ATC. Let's grab some onto there. Maybe on that side. I don't know. That's one of my new ephemera stamps that I've just experimented with on the back of there. So we might want to use that. Yeah. Just making the most of the ink that's on the mat, really. Just going to dry the bottom of there because we don't really need any on there. Let's have a look what we've got. I'm going to let it go the other way up again. So it's going up and down and up and down. And part of me is sort of quite happy with where it's got to. I might do another little spritz of white. Just to give it that wintry look. And let that move around. And in a minute, I'm probably going to do just a little bit of sponging right around the top. One thing I haven't decided is whether I might use some snowflakes on the side of the jar as well, because I've got, as you know, lots of die cut snowflakes ready to go. So we might put some snowflakes part way up the jar. So I'm just turning and turning so that the ink is not going only in one direction, not settling only at the top of the stars or only at the bottom of the stars. It's getting a chance to go all the way round. And we might have another little go with the heat tool. I've still got the safety goggles on, peering at everything through the safety goggles at the moment. So let's have a little go at just, again, a little blast of heat to just help out that drying process. Now, I think I mentioned earlier that the shimmer mister is permanent when dry. The distress products that I've added, of course, aren't. So I'm now going to need to just watch myself a little bit on not pouring water all over these candle jars at any point. But it's not something I really do. Nobody needs to wash a candle lantern. I'm just helping those dribbles of colour to set into where they are. I'm going to turn them over again. You can see each time I turn it over, it is still losing ink, but that's all good. Patience is a virtue with this process. Again, a bit too much of a stripe going down there, so I'm just dabbing it back. And then just finally with this sponge, I think what I'll use is the snowflake, but I'm going to give it a spritz of water as well, because I don't want completely opaque white. And I think I'm going to run this from the top down as though it's a sort of snowy sky. So I'm just adding sort of cloudy. The joy of a natural sponge is it gives you fabulous texture as opposed to an artificial sponge, which is very uniform or very solid. You can see there are sort of scrabbly holes and bits where you can decide how much snowiness you want. So I'm just doing that around the top here so that I can get into those ridges where the lid goes on, and it's just creating a little bit of extra snowy detail in the sky. Anywhere else I want to do that, yeah, I have decided I want some around the bottom as well because I like the effect. Of course the trees are going to be there, but now they'll have a lovely white background behind them and just the stars in between. Notice I've just mopped up whatever's on the mat as well. So when you're playing with a process like this, you just need to experiment with the products you've got, see what kind of effect you get. If you don't like something, there's almost always going to be time to rinse it off, wash it off before it dries, to just knock it back. The subtlety of that starry texture underneath just makes me really happy, and when the candle is lit, you're going to get a real kind of impression of that starriness without it being sort of full on. Yeah, I'm really enjoying the pair of them. I don't know if you can try and give you a look at what they're like in the light, and then with the light coming through them. So it's completely different when the light hits them as opposed to when you've got the light coming through, creating that lovely translucence. So I'm going to leave those to dry fully upright, I think, because I don't mind if there are little drips going downwards. So that's where we're at so far with our snowy jars. And the last thing, we'll be adding some die cut decorations. Back soon. We're getting towards the final stages with these jars, but I thought I'd just like to highlight these stars just a little more in places, maybe not over the whole thing. And I think probably my way to do that is going to be with one of the distressed crayons, Picket fence obviously, which is the white one, and I'm just kind of holding it upright and rubbing across the edges of that texture, and it's just hitting where the texture sits up off the jar. It's just hitting those edges. So again, this is going to mean the jars can't be picked up and stroked all the time. But if all you're doing is popping a tea light into the top and lighting it, you really shouldn't need to be picking up the jar the whole time. I mean, this will stay put unless you start rubbing it once it's sort of set itself and dry. But I think it's just giving a nice extra little touch of presence to those textured stars without completely covering up the star shape in the middle. It's just hitting the edges, which I think is quite a nice effect, just giving us a little bit of extra focus on those carefully stenciled stars we created. It's a really useful tool, a distress crayon, and if I had it in no other colour, I would definitely have it in Picket fence, because the white is just really useful as a highlight, as you can see. Just getting a little bit of extra detail and interest. Good, grand. So with my Treeline die cuts, I've been giving them a little bit of curling so that when it comes to gluing them around the jar, they'll just be a little more willing to cooperate with that shape. And that's as simple as holding it between my fingertips and kind of curling it backwards. It's just going to mean that I'm not, as it's got glue all over it, I'm not in the position of trying to make it go round corners as I glue it onto the jars. And at this point, it's really, it's very simple. It's glue. And again, pretty much any acrylic glue you've got should do this job. It's quite nice if you've got one with a fine applicator, because as you can see, there are some really lovely detailed bits in these trees. But other than that, you know, any glue you've got going is going to do the job. So we know we're going to need at least one whole one on each jar. Thinking about it, the jar kind of goes away at the bottom, doesn't it? So I probably don't need glue right along that bottom edge, because there's nothing for it to glue to. Not that it matters if there's glue there, but we don't want to waste glue. There we go. So simple as that. And because this is a textured surface, it might be a job to get it to stay put initially, but you're just going to have to be patient with it. And what I want to do is line it up with the floor, as it were. So I'm actually going to do it standing upright, and I'm holding the die cut so that that is level with the surface of the desk, and that's when I'm going to press down, so that I've got that clean line at the bottom where it's just going to stand as though it were a completely straight-sided jar, which, as you can see, it's not. It tapers off at the bottom. But I don't want to sort of glue this going downwards onto that taper. I just want it going straight down to the ground, which it isn't at this end. Can you see how that's coming away from the straight line there? Oh, it may be in the cutting of the die, of course, in which case I'll have to do a bit of trimming later. But yeah, just making sure all those bits are lying down. Good. See, I already love that. So now it's just going to be a question of, I'm just going to eyeball, because I'm not very interested in measuring things. I'm going to eyeball where I need this second one to go. So I want it to line up with there, and I can afford just a little bit of overlap there. That's fine. Those trees don't need to overlap, but the base can. And it goes around to here. So I'm just going to see which tree I can catch, and it's that one. So all I need is a little snip up here, and just detach these trees here. And hopefully And look, that gives me some lovely little trees left over to go, oh, I don't know, maybe on, is it around? Maybe on one of these tags? Look at that. Potentially. I'm not saying definitely. I never say definitely because I'm always changing my mind. So, bit of glue onto this bit that we've now cut to size. Just going up into the tips of those trees so that I can make sure they're not loose. Because again, when you're picking it up to put candles in or picking it up to light it, you don't want to snag those. Although with moderate care, again, you're not going to do any major damage. So again, I'm just going to make sure, I'm going to basically position it, and then I'm going to make sure it's actually lined up with the surface of the table before I fully press down. So you will find there are places where it's kind of going, oh, do I have to? Do I really have to stick there? Are you sure you want me to stick? And you just have to be quite insistent. So yes, please, I would like you to stick down everywhere I'm pressing. Thank you very much. I love those little slightly darker trees there in the shadow, obviously. So really, paper to paper, that should be gluing without any problem. And if it's not, it's probably because I didn't really hit it with any glue there. That bit really doesn't seem to want to, so I'm just going to tick it. This is why a fine applicator glue is quite useful. Just stick some glue right under that leaf that didn't want to go down, branch. And yeah, I clearly haven't got anything going on there. So again, just a little bit of glue where it's needed. And I've got my tree line. Oh, love it. And then my idea is that I'm probably going to put some, yes, a couple of branches around the top fastened with twine. So let's find myself a couple of nice contrasting branches, like the shape of that one and the shape of that one. It might be as simple as that, you know. I might decide to put a snowflake or maybe an actual pine cone on the top there. So I'm just going to make sure I position those near my favourite trees. Do I want them near the dark green trees? No, I think I want those around the sort of shadowy side. I think that's where I want those. Don't want them right where I've got the join line, because that's basically the sort of the front of the jar, if you like. Actually, where I stand mine is on a wood burning stove that stands in the middle of the room. It's a rotating one. It's very rarely lit. So instead of lighting the wood burning stove, we tend to have lots of candle jars on the top of it. Anybody who follows my Instagram will have seen videos of that at Halloween. So yeah, I think they're going to go there. I think what I'll do is I'll just give them a little dab of glue to start them off, but really I'm going to use twine to basically hold them in place. So we'll pop you there. There you go. You just stay there for a sec. And you there, because I'm going to have to go to the other side of the room to go and get my twine is all. So let's pop them approximately where I want them. Yep, let's put that there and that there so the jar doesn't roll away in the meantime. And I'll be back in a sec with my twine. I'm down to the last dregs of a big ball of fine twine, and because I tend to snip it off when I can't find the ends, it may be that I find myself with pieces, more than one piece here. It might come to a sudden end. That's got itself in a bit of a knot there, not to worry. I think that's probably enough to go around the jar a few times and tie. So I'm actually going to snip that off right like that. Grand. So then all I need to do is, if this is going to be my front, I'm going to keep a little bit of twine there for tying in a knot. And then mostly what I like to try and do is just get myself in the creases of these threads, the threads for the jam jar. Trying to show you on camera makes this look a lot more complicated than it really is. It really isn't that tricky to wind twine around the top of a jam jar. Is that going to go enough times? Oh, just not quite enough. Well, there's an easy fix for that, which is to just put in some extra, which I might well do. And then I'm just going to tie a simple knot at the point of my tree branches, because also I'm just going to have a look at whether I want a pine cone or some such up there. I've got some little pine cones I picked up see, it's just good like that, isn't it? It's let me just grab a pine cone. I'm not going to switch you all up again and switch you all on again and have another little whizzy turn around. Here are pine cones I've picked up on my woodland walks. I didn't pick the cinnamon sticks up on my woodland walks, I bought those. But lots of little, these are apparently from alder trees. And this is from some pine tree or other. And I just want to have a little look and see. Oh, that is adorable. Okay. It's happening. Right, let's see if I can find a little twosome. And there were a couple of twosomes. 3 feels a bit OTT, although 3 is supposed to be a good number. It's a bit OTT for the little one. That'll work on the bigger jar, I think. But I think I'd really prefer... Aha! That's a little fragile, but I think given glue and given a little bit of assistance, I can get that to work. So I'm going for another piece of twine. Again, the twine is assistance. It is going to be glue that is the main attacher here. And I only really want to go around maybe twice this time. My twine's in a knot now. That's really unhelpful of it. So I'm going to use my gloopy glue, which you'll have seen in action on other videos. This is the super heavy gel, and it's so gloopy that it will hold things in place even before it's dry. I'm just looking for an applicator. I just want something to just hold those. I'm going to put a little bit on each pine cone. In fact, it was last week, wasn't it, when we were sticking pine cones to tags, I think, that we were doing that. And that's going to go there. So I've got some stability with the pine cones themselves are attached basically to glass. I've got the stem going up there. Going to trim off the top of that because we don't need all of that going on. And then I'm just going to wrap a second bit of twine around the top here. And then I've got nice dangly bits of twine. I've got nice pine cones. I've got nice pine branches. Are you going to go twice round, or shall I just do you once? Again, if I weren't trying to hold this so that you could see it on camera, this would be a simpler job. Oh, go away. Right, I'm just going to hold it in place. Round you go. Twice. Have you got twice in you? Come on. It's like a watched pot, isn't it, that never boils. A filmed bit of twine is never going to behave. Okay, once round, fair enough. I didn't cut you quite long enough to go twice. But given we've already got some bits, that's fine. Now you're getting caught up in my pine branches. Grand, caught you. Did you see the pine branches, pine cones just move then? So I'll need to stick them back down. Just a little bit of twine. Okay, let's put you back in position. Grand. And that's a little bit too long, so we'll trim you off there. Simple as, and then lots of room for my tea light to go inside. Aye, that makes me happy. And you can see the jar is still plenty translucent, so if I hold it so that the light can go inside it, you can see that. So obviously at the end of this video I will be zooming in for some lit candles, and I'll do that both this is my pinecone branch. I'll do that both at sort of early evening and also, oh look, you've escaped from my twine now. Twine and pine. I'm going to fiddle with this, get it right, get the twine round the top of that branch again and do the other jar, and then yes, as I say, zoom in for some close-ups of what we've created. Oh no, I'm not done yet, am I? You know what the final step is. It's going to be just a little bit of spatter. So here's my white Fresco paint, Snowflake, and my scrabby little spatter brush, just softening that paint a little bit so I can see what I've got. Little spatters over those pine cones, little spatters over those trees. And then again, it would obviously be easier with that lying down, but I'm not going to do it lying down. I'm going to spatter like that because I don't want to smudge the ones around the front side. And that's actually quite good because now the spatter is going downwards onto the pine trees like snowfall. It's just to get a little bit of snowy detailing. Grand. So as I say, I'm going to finish off this second pot and then I'll be diving in for some candlelit finishing shots for you. I hope you've enjoyed seeing those mixed media backgrounds coming to life. As you heard all the way along, there are so many variations that are possible here. So by all means, try out all those different possibilities as you go. You don't have to do it exactly like this. You can do it using whatever materials you've got. Experiment, explore, try things out. And you too can have a whole set of beautiful candle lanterns, perfect little Christmas gifts, but also perfect to just light up a winter night. Do leave any comments or questions down below. I always love to hear from you. A thumbs up is really welcome. And of course, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I'd love it if you would join us for this creative journey. Thanks so much for watching and happy crafting all.